This is a Broadcast Devices product update.
I just want to briefly run down what we're going to talk about today, and then we'll get into a more in-depth discussion of each of these products. We've got three things to talk about here today that we're very excited about. First is our SWP 300 series remote control system with integrated motorized switch control for up to 2 switches. Of course, there's integration to our DPS 100D series true RMS power meters, and we also have an expandable 24-channel panel that can be added to the system, the IOX24, which provides 24 channels of status, 24 channels of control outputs, and we also included 8 more analog inputs. So we think we have a very complete remote control system. The thing that's really, really exciting about this product is the brand new graphical user interface that we developed for it. And it's very, very easy to intuitive to set up and to operate. We think you're going to like it. We'll get into that in just a bit. So next, we want to talk about the DPS 100D series true RMS power meters that we've been making for some time now. Many of you watching are customers of ours and have the meters in your transmitter sites, and we appreciate your past business, but I think you're going to like what you see today. We have a brand new graphical user interface for that product, and we've added some new features. So we've completely upgraded the firmware in the unit and added some really important features that we've been hearing from customers that we needed to do, and so we've added those, and we want to talk about those today. The next thing we want to talk about is something that's brand new from the ground up for us, is the SCA-100 dual 67 kilohertz subcarrier generator. That's right, you heard me right. This is a brand new 67 kilohertz subcarrier generator. There's actually 2 of them in the same chassis, and they're independent. There hasn't been a new SCA generator built, or one built at all, in many years, and there are still a lot of stations that are relying on subcarriers for either revenue enhancement or for their own internal purposes. So we developed this new product at a customer request, actually, and we're very excited to show it to you today. It's completely DSP based, and it's SNMP controlled. And I think that's a first. I don't think anybody's ever built an SCA generator that's SNMP based and controlled. So we're going to show you that. And another thing that's very important about not only the SCA-100, but the other 2 products I mentioned, as a matter of fact, all of our web-enabled products now, is they are all completely Adobe Flash free. We've been listening to customers tell us that they're concerned about Adobe Flash security issues and about the fact that support is going to end for Adobe Flash at the end of 2020. So we got busy, and we have upgraded the entire product line and eliminated the Flash requirement to run our product. So we're very excited about that. Hope you will be too. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the SWP 300 remote control application software that we developed for Windows. And we're looking at the main screen. And before we get into this, I just want to show you one thing that you need to do to get into this main screen. And then this is an initial connect. So you go in here and you put your IP address information in, the other pertinent information in this column. That's done once. You press connect, and up will come up the unit information, which has some pertinent information like the unit name. If you've given it one, you can give it call letters or a site name. The firmware revisions and the serial number. Of course, this one's saying 0 because this is a pre-production model used for demonstration purposes here at the shop. All right, so let's go into control. We're going to go through a very cursory view of this. So let's get to it. This is the RF page, or our summary page, and on it is the facility to monitor 2 of the BDI DPS 100D power meters over here, and they're placed in the system as shown here on the switch configuration chart. One is for showing the power that's being delivered to either of the antennas, and the other one is for the test load. And then, of course, we added the SWP macros, which are standard in every SWP 200 and 300 product that we build. And if you are a customer and owner of an SWP 200, you're probably familiar with these. This is where we automate the functionality of the switches and manage the interlocks and transmitter restart and that kind of thing. That's all done for you. That's not a macro you have to write. So we've done that for the switch configurations. We have a couple of other things here, the transmitter status. If you have an external status input from the transmitter to show that they're on. They're both lit here because we have them forced on to show you what they look like when they're lit up. You can put the unit in auto manual, and then there's a fault reset. Now over here we have some presets that you can program yourself. So these are kind of like macros. You can go in and you can set up different things to happen and label the button. These are probably the most commonly used things perhaps, or where you have multiple relays or general purpose inputs or switch management that you want to perform all at one time. That can be programmed into these buttons. Briefly show you that in the setup here in just a moment. The second half of the screen is really a cursory view of all the GPIO of the unit and the relay outputs. So we're monitoring up to 12 analog inputs with this unit. There are 4 in the SWP300 chassis, and then if you have the IOX24 extender panel, it gives you an additional, well, it would give you an additional 8, so you'd have a total of 12. And you can see one of them is actually showing that there's an alarm condition, and we'll go take a look at that in a minute. It's showing that there's something, the transmitter 1 power is, looks like it's over a limit. So we can go check that out over here, and we can see that it's 8.47 kilowatts. And, oh, I'm sorry, that's kilovolts, and we're actually looking at the wrong one. It's the analog input number 3, so it's showing 108.8%, so that needs attention. So the operator can take a look at this and say, oh, I got to go take a look at this. Instead of having to pour through a lot of screens, they can see what's going on right away and then just go zero in on it like so. So you can do that with any of the these indicators. These are the GP outputs. They're all showing that they're in the off state. These can be set for momentary or maintain. We'll show you that in just a bit. The GPIs, same thing. We have on-off conditions. And you can go and take a look at the GPI inputs and see what they actually are and which ones are on or off. And there's the GPOs, just to show you that. That's control of the GPOs. They're all set for momentary at the moment. Relays, and the various things that you can put in here. You can name them, and you can set them up for latched or momentary closure, which we'll show you in the I/O setup. What this is indicating that this was this action was performed recently. This is a momentary, and if you go back to the RF page, you can see that it's showing, hey, relay number 1 was exercised recently here. So I can go and I can clear that. I'm not going to do any harm here because this is a momentary closure for turning the transmitter on. If I simply do that, it is simply going to clear the display. And I can go back here and you can show that it's off now, or the display is cleared. Now, of course, you can set these up for a latched input, and then you want to be careful about doing on or off. But this is just an extra indicator for you. So that's basically the control of the unit. You have the summary page. You can check your analog inputs. You can look at your GPIs. You can control your GPOs and your relays, all with the touch of a mouse click. So just briefly showing you the I/O setup. This is how you go in and you set the unit up. Analog inputs, you can select a channel, put your min max sample voltages in, and the display indications that you want with the units that you want to display. Set your faults up. And then actually I got to show you this. We have a handy test gauge that we developed for the product. And so you put in the actual, this is the actual DC voltage that is being applied to the A to D converter of the input of the unit. So that's the DC plate voltage sample here, PAV sample, that's being read. And you'd put that in here, hit set, and then you can take a look at your indication and see if that makes sense based upon what you've put in here. So you can trim this as you need to, and when you're all done, you just quit the test mode and you should be in good shape. So it takes the drudgery out of setting up analog inputs. General purpose inputs, here you can name them and you can set them as to whether they're invert input or not. So what this means is in the default condition, a low going in will light the light, and if you want to set it for a high to light the light, you just do that, and you can do that on a channel by channel basis. Okay, and then on the general purpose outputs, once again, you can name them, and you can set them as to whether they're momentary or latch. Of course, momentary is the default, but you can set them for latch by doing that. Let me just show you what happens when you do that. I can go back to the control screen here, go back to RF page, and you see they're all off. But now if I go to a GP out and I do that, and you notice that this changed from what looks like a pulse to a solid bar. So now if I go back in to the RF page here, the summary page, you'll see that that one's on. Okay, and that's kind of how that works. So there's the setup. There are a few other things to look at. You have a logging function, and we're looking at, well, right now we're looking at the room temperature, and that's a graph of the room temperature. It looks like it's been pretty stable. And you can do that in graphical form, and you can do it in a list form, and it shows you what the temperature is. Of course, these are point numbers, but you can put a time and date stamp in here as well. Of course, you can give all of this a file name and copy it to the machine that you're running the app on, but the unit itself at the site is also storing this information and sending this information out periodically as you set up. And let's see, what else have we got left to show you here? On the Automate page, this is how you set up those macros that we were talking about, or the presets. You can pick a button, and you can give it a name, and you can go in and you can set up, well, you can go in and set up relays. Right, on this one it looks like we have 1, 3, 5, and 7 turning on at the same time. And so that one button for button number 1, which is auxiliary antenna ops, will close those relays at the same time. And they'll all be momentary closures because you set that up over on the relay setup page. And that's all you do. So setting this unit up takes a very, very short amount of time. We made it as easy as possible, no complicated software to have to learn and memorize anything. It's all done for you very, very simply with these tabs. And that's the whole app. So we hope you take a look at the SWP300. We think it's an important product. Some other things that we've got to mention here. First of all, everything that's going on here is operating via SNMP. All SWP300s, all SWP200s, our power meters, the DPS100D series, and even our audio toolbox series like the ATB300 and the GPM300 are all SNMP agent devices, which means there are MIBs published for each product, which also means that not only can you use BDI's graphical user interface to operate and control and monitor your product, but you can use third-party software that's SNMP compatible and third-party remote control systems that are SNMP compatible. So even if the SWP300 doesn't look right for your operation, maybe you need more of something that a more expensive remote control system might provide, the SWP300 can still act as a peripheral device for that larger system, a subsystem of the larger system, to doing things like switch control and monitoring power and doing all this other GPIO stuff and control stuff. So you have a remote control within a remote control in that scenario. But this product's really been designed and targeted for the budget-conscious broadcaster. It's a medium-priced product. It's somewhere in the middle of all the remote control products. The SWP300-2T, the list price is $31.95, $3,195, and the 1T is $29.95. So it's really a feature-packed unit for the price point. So we think this is something that's been needed in the marketplace, and that's why we wanted to bring it to you. So for more information about applications and configuration for your operations, certainly contact us here at Broadcast Devices. So hopefully you've enjoyed this brief introduction to the SWP300 series remote control from BDI, and thanks for watching. We'd like to tell you what we've been doing to make improvements to the very popular DPS100D series power meters from BDI. This is the Generation 2 DPS100D. I happen to have one right here in my hand. This is the DPS100D-N. It is an N-style connector in and out. Many folks don't realize we make one this small, but we do. This particular meter is 200 watts full scale, but we can make these up to a kilowatt full scale. And the other significant change in this particular meter is that this is a broadband meter, 80 to 1,000 megahertz. And you'll notice no slugs, nothing to change. It's all done in software. And the software is the big story, and that's what we want to show you. We've upgraded the firmware to run the meter. We've added some significant improvements to the operation of the meter, And most importantly, we've eliminated the requirement to use Adobe Flash to run the product. This is a completely Flash-free product. It's a Windows app. There is a basic browser introduction that you need to do for setup, but it's HTML5, very simple to do. So we're going to get into all that right now. All right, here's the brand new DPS-100D Generation 2 software that we've developed, firmware application and software that we developed for Windows. And this is the main screen, and you'll notice a similarity between this and the previous video that we showed you of the SWP300 remote control system, that it has a similar look. It does. It has the same look and feel, so we've tried to streamline our product, so if you learn one, the others are very easy to navigate. So just real quickly, we're going to run through this product. Again, there's a more in-depth video on our YouTube channel for the DPS-100D Generation 2 meter that will give you a real run through the meter, but we just want to very quickly go through some of the new features and some of the screens and show you how the meter is set up and operated. So this is the main screen. The most significant difference you'll see right away is that we've added the frequency, so that the actual frequency that the meter is calibrated for is displayed on the front unit of the unit, and right on the meter page. It's right there. And another significant change that we've made is that all DPS-100D power meters are now frequency agile in the field. You do not have to send the meter back for recalibration. If it's on an FM frequency, you can put it on any other FM frequency, and it's fully calibrated, automatically calibrated in the field. Same thing for television. So we've done that. Another significant addition, speaking of radio and television, FM and television, we've also now added support for all digital AM. So we have a medium wave meter that operates actually not only for the AM band, but also the entire HF spectrum. So if you have an HF application or an all digital medium wave application for AM radio, the DPS-100D can now be used for measuring accurate power for digital AM. Okay, so moving right along here, because I don't have a lot of time. Of course, the forward and reflective power indications, familiar to everyone who has a DPS-100D or a power meter for that matter. We've also added simultaneous indication of VSWR. Previously, you had to pick one or the other of reflective power or VSWR. Now we give you all three simultaneously. Still have internal temperature and the external temperature plug-in, the TMP100 that's available from BDI, and our pressure indication from our PSW100 pressure sensor indicator, which is also available from BDI. And then the lower half of the page are the various set points for alarm conditions, and some are showing that they are an alarm. Those are something you can set up yourself. The status of the general purpose inputs, of course, there are 5 available to the user, and the 6th one is our external interlock input, which is what we call LOTO, or a lockout tagout. And then we have a control panel for a single transmitter. Very often our customers use the BDI DPS-100D power meter as a remote control for a very simple site like a translator or a single transmitter site. So you have positive control of the transmitter when you configure one of the relays to do that, which is done in the setup. And then of course the 3-strike counter, which is our proprietary trademarked 3-strike VSWR protection system that keeps track of the number of VSWR hits you have, and when you get up to 3, it'll open your interlocks and protect your transmission system from damage. And of course there is a reset there, which is shown grayed out here. So let's move right along here. Oh, you know what? I wanted to show you the Connect screen. Very much like the SWP300. Put your information in over here, hit Connect, and it brings up all the information about the unit. What's new is we've also added the serial number for the directional coupler that is mated to your power meter. So that's there electronically available. Before you had to go read it off of the directional coupler itself. So that's another improvement that we added. The events tab is very much the same. We have an event log keeping track of all alarm conditions, and it keeps track of a number of events, and you can scroll through them and then you can purge them. And this also can send out an email log of these if you have that set up. And speaking of setup, let's go into the setup menu really quickly and just go through all of these. You notice again the setup is very similar to the SWP300. We have some tabs in here that allow you to set up your door name, well, that's what we call the first one, door ajar, I guess we set that for. The inputs, the general purpose inputs can be given names here, and then you can set up your alarm conditions for what you want to be warned about, or to create a fault condition. And some of these are check marked, as you can see, VSWR fault, a warning, and so on and so forth. The display actually is the display settings of the unit itself. Every DPS 100D power meter has an LCD display on it for convenience, and so you can set the display up for either VSWR indication, return loss or row, and power indication, watts or kilowatts or dBm, and the temperature indication in Celsius or Fahrenheit. Emailing is pretty straightforward. Set up your server information, put your users in, and how often you want them to get emails, or logging. You can turn the logging on or off here and set that up. So let's set it up for a daily log. And network setup is for the network time protocol. That's defaulted to on. If you have access to a time protocol server, it's going to sync up to that. And if you don't, you can deselect that and put the time and date in manually and hit set, and that'll set the time and date for you. And of course, you can keep track of your time zone. The remote tab, very simply, your interlock groups that are tied to the general purpose inputs, you can use the other the 5 general purpose inputs that are available to you for simple indications, or you can make them part of an interlock group. So we can set that up, and then you can enable them as needed. We still support the legacy remote control systems that have metering inputs. We do support DC outputs for forward reflected power, and this is the scaling for that. This is how you set up your 2 relays, interlock or alarm, transmitter on, alarm, transmitter on off, and RF presence. RF presence lets you have a relay that closes anytime RF is present, and that's pretty handy for RF safety. You can light a light with that, or have it sound a SON alert or something like that. You now have the ability to trigger VSWR events to open the interlock and keep track of the 3 strike. Before it was only reflected power, now it's either. And again, you can set that up over here. You set your trip points up in the RF setup page. Of course, you can also have them for reflected power, and you can switch between the two. If you like to keep track of the reflected power, to have that do your trip, you can do that, or you can use VSWR. So these are some of the improvements that we made to the product. This is a really quick overview. I know I speak very fast. Well, after all, I'm from New York, and we do everything quickly here, so that's just the way it is. But again, we just want to remind everybody this is an SNMP agent device, so it's compatible with all modern SNMP-based remote control systems and third-party software, in addition to the BDI application software. New is the fact that we can handle digital AM now, so call us about that. We're very excited about that as well. So there's a lot of new things happening with the DPS 100D True RMS power line available from BDI. Call us for applications information. All right, the next thing we'd like to show you is BDI's brand new model SCA 200 dual 67 kilohertz SCA generator. Now, I got one right here behind me in the rack, and you'll notice the lack of controls on the unit because there are no physical controls on this unit because it's DSP based and SNMP controlled. Each generator has an A and B input, which is XLR balanced, and 2 independent outputs that are 50 ohm BNC. So in the next installment here, we'll take a look at the setup and show you how easy it is to control and set up the SCA 200. Now, this is an HTML5 browser interface, so it's free from Adobe Flash, as all of our products are now. And what you basically do is go in and set up the unit name, username, password, SNMP read and write communities, the SNMP port, and of course the IP information, IP address, IP mask, default gateway, and DNS server. And once you've done that, hit the save button, and that's in there for good. And always a good idea to take a screenshot of this. Anytime you're doing any kind of password saving or changes to IP configurations, it's always good to take a screenshot and tuck that away in a safe place. All right, let's take a look at the SCA 200 Windows application that we created for this product. This is an app that you install on a Windows machine. It's compatible with Windows 10 and previous editions of Windows, I think going all the way back to XP. First thing you would do is go to the Connect screen, and you would enter the IP address and port information, read and write community that you saved in the initial HTML5 browser interface connection. And once you've done that, click on Connect. That will connect with the unit. It'll bring up the unit name that you've saved, firmware revision, and the serial number. Of course, the firmware revision, again, is a good thing to have handy in case you need service. You can tell us what firmware revision it is. So let's click on the Control tab, and as we said earlier, this is a dual SCA generator. We have two completely independent SCA generators, so you can set them up independently from one another, channel 1 and channel 2. So let's go through channel 1 because channel 2 setup is exactly the same. We have an input select control. This unit has two inputs, balanced XLR inputs, so you can select between those or an internal tone generator. Now, in addition to being able to do this with the app or via an SNMP browser or any SNMP software or third-party remote control system that's SNMP compatible, there's also a hardware GPIO on the rear panel of the unit so that you can select between A and B inputs. Now, one example of where you might use this is if you wanted to interface the generator with an EAS generator receiver and you wanted to interrupt the program audio to insert EAS information and you wanted to trigger it from the EAS generator, you'd be able to do that with the GPIO. So that's just one example. Next, you have the input level control. That can be adjusted in 1 dB increments or 1/10 of a dB increments for a fine trim, and you have a plus and minus 10 dB gain range. And again, that's independent. The A and the B input can be set for different levels if necessary. Next item for setup is preemphasis, and we can select between 50, 75, 150, 225 microseconds, or you can turn it off. So let's go ahead and select 225 microseconds. The next audio option you have is a filter, a low-pass filter, which you can either have bypassed or you can set for 10 kilohertz or 5 kilohertz. Let's go ahead and set it up for 5 kilohertz. And then the mode control. So this allows you to turn the unit off, turn it on, or put it in the auto mode. And the auto mode is a traditional SCA generator auto mode, whereby if the audio is removed from the input of the unit, that the SCA output will mute after so many seconds. And again, this is another item that can be controlled by the parallel GPIO or any of the other mentioned SNMP interfaces. And then the last thing you need to do is to set up the output level, and otherwise known as the injection level that would be fed to adjust for the particular exciter. And so this unit has two independent 50 ohm BNC outputs, so they can be adjusted accordingly. And again, plus and minus 10 dB gain range in 1 dB increments and 1/10 of a dB increments. So once you've done that, the unit's all set up, and you can go ahead and operate the SCA generator into your transmitters, and that's all you need to do.
Quality products, quality service, and quality solutions from Broadcast Devices.